up until my 30th, I was thinking like, I'm okay. I'm fine. My past, whatever happened to me, I don't have a scar on my body. Like, I'm good. I'm okay. Until I started my first business, and it was almost like all my demons came out to play. Here I was, and this is a little bridge to hustle hard. Here I was, and I wasn't aware, feeling totally unworthy, low self-esteem, even though I seemed always confident, like perfectionism. I was an overthinker. Oh, the nights that I couldn't sleep because I was doubting myself, my decisions, all the endless things on my to-do list. And I sacrificed literally my whole life. I can still see myself standing there in the supermarket on my first day off in months. I wanted to make Bloody Marys, and I remember holding a celery stick for 10 minutes, wondering if it was worth spending those €2. I mean, what the fuck? Everything about my life felt so hard. Not long before, I had manifested everything I ever wanted. The big job, the money, traveling the world. If only my life felt half as good as it looked. I figured that starting my own business would make things better, but was I wrong? I was on the verge of burning out, working 12 hours a day, sacrificing my social life, having no money and no success. But it was in this moment that I felt this rude awakening. Like, how did I get myself here? This realization kicked off a spiritual quest. If I created this, I could also create something way better. And all I wanted for my life was to feel easy, to experience flow, magic, and pleasure. Hi, I'm Alex, and this is why I'm hosting the Hustle Hard podcast. Here we get in the creator seat to no longer just survive, but thrive in business and life. Let's go to the show. Hi, this is Alex, and welcome to the Hustle Hard podcast. I am so excited to have you here with me. This first episode is all about the introduction of the intention behind Hustle Hard. Where is this podcast all about? And with that, I also want to dive into my story and what Hustle Hard means to me. And the backstory, me, your host. Who am I? What got me here? And especially for the women who've been following me for a while, because I've been taking a little hiatus of 6 months. Like if you've been with me, I've had a previous podcast, Limitless Living podcast, which I ran for over a year. And that came to a conclusion. And I launched a new podcast, Manifest Your Business Empire, which was, in a year, especially as an entrepreneur, we evolve. We change. We shift our vision, our mission, our desires, like who we are. Like, I don't know about you, but I hardly recognize the person I was a year ago. So with that, we pivot, sometimes our products, sometimes how we see ourselves and let ourselves be seen. And Manifest Your Business Empire, that last podcast, and particularly if you've been with me throughout this journey, I think I only launched or released 4 or 5 episodes. And I want to take you through the journey that I've been taking, or more particularly, what has led me to this moment here, and why did I launch this new podcast, especially after only releasing 4 episodes in the Manifest Your Business Empire. And the story I want to start with is that, just this reminder for all of us, that life is art. This is also what Jennifer Lopez says, and she's my all-time hero. And she says also, life is art and we are the artist. So that means that when we envision life to be this blank sheet, that we are the creator. You can paint, you can draw, you can make whatever you desire it to be. So sometimes that means making unpopular decisions, because who launches a podcast and then stops after 4 episodes? Well, it's possible. You can. We don't live for the outer world. We live for ourselves. So taking through the backstory of my 6-month hiatus, for any of you who were wondering, like, where have you been? Like, what happened? I've been good. And honestly, it's been the best decision that I could have made for myself, because also here, Just a reminder that we live for ourselves. We don't live for our community. We don't live for our family, our friends. We live for ourselves. And what I learned is that, especially when you serve and you're an entrepreneur, you serve your people, you serve your clients. We can only serve when we have served ourselves fully. And it's the biggest cliche, right? We can't pour from an empty cup. And then, well, we know this rationally. Do we live by that? Because a lot of times when we put so much pressure on ourselves and we work and work and work and we feel tired and depleted, that's our cup empty. How can we serve our best work from that? So for me, even though that I have, and that's what they say, the longest journey you'll ever take is the journey from head to heart. And even though that I felt, and this is a lifelong journey, let me tell you, because there's always, always new levels that we find within ourselves. But I was so excited, taking you back to, because I think the last time I was online was somewhere in June, August. So come March, April, I think, I was so excited to launch. I had a new program in mind and I had this masterclass, and a whole funnel that I had in my mind. And again, that's mind. That's what we create with our minds. Even though that when our heart is in it, our mind then suddenly thinks like, okay, you need to do sales page. You need to create emails. You need to create a masterclass. You need to create, all the things that we need to create from ourselves. And even though that I felt so excited doing it, in a period of 6 to 8 weeks from that excitement, I found myself working 10, 12 hours again because there was just so much work to do, so much boxes to tick, to have it all released because I was in a hurry. And while I was creating this, I kept hearing, I don't know if you ever observe yourself, where you almost look at yourself from the third person. And I was watching myself telling friends, telling clients, like, this needs to be it. It needs to happen. But in that, in our words are spelling, right? Our spells. So what are we actually manifesting? Because from that place, like, it needs to happen. It's pressure, so much pressure. Because what happens if it doesn't work? Like being an entrepreneur, running your own business, it is an experiment. Some things don't work out the way we plan, but that's how we grow and evolve. Failing, if I look at myself, I've been so afraid to fail. But when you're afraid, when you have that fear to fail, you always hold back and then you don't experiment. It's almost like a scientist. And I always say, like, how do you know if you like sushi? You taste it, you try it, and then maybe you don't like it. And then you're like, okay, I don't like sushi. And we don't obsess about it. We don't feel emotional about it. But for some reason, when we try new things in our business and it fails, we feel like a failure. But we are scientists. We are experimenters. Or like me, I like to believe I'm an adventurer, and aren't the paths off the beaten tracks, aren't those the most beautiful, the most magic? And in order to get there, we need to surrender or accept that by time we will get lost, because that's how we get off the beaten track, because there's not a lot of people who've been there before me or before us. So with my words, I needed to succeed. I needed it to happen. There was so much pressure. And when I was ready to launch, I felt depleted. I felt exhausted. And I was like, and in that moment, and every moment, we get to make a decision. And the decision that I made for myself is this what I want my life to be? And honestly, the answer was no. And it scared the shit out of me because where do you go from there? Where do you go from there? But when we're open and vulnerable to ourselves and we realize, like, I am the creator, I am putting this kind of pressure on myself because I'm in a hurry. There's a sense of fear because it needs to work out. And I was like, no, I'm not going to opt in to this truth anymore. Like, I'm going to release the notion that it needs to be hard and that it needs to be pressure and it needs to be sacrifice because I'm burning out. Again, I've been here before, where you just feel tired and exhausted. And we're like, I'm about to launch. That's where I need my most potent energy. And my energy is done. So imagine a marathon runner who just ran a marathon. And you can't even celebrate your success because the next day you need to run one again. Which one do you think will be better? It's the first one, of course, because that's where he trained for that. He had the most energy for that. And the next day, depleted. So I made myself a pledge. So what I did, and I tried to actually sit down and I was like, okay, I'm going to hire myself out to businesses. I'm going to look. And that's just been a different income stream for myself where I'm not going to work. I haven't been working one-on-one, but I've been hiring myself out on businesses, and to be more precise, one business. And they hired me, and the month running up to that was scary. I was scared shitless. Like, that was scary because it was a new playing field, and all the doubts and all the fears and all the things that came up to me where I was like, will they even want me? Do I have something to offer? Like, we're all human. We all have the same voices. But I had such a vision in my mind of the type of money that I wanted to make, because if I didn't want to run my business from pressure and fear, what do I need and what kind of income do I need in my business so I can invest it back into growing? Because if there's one thing, is that, and maybe this is you, that as an entrepreneur, we think that we need to do it all. And we wear all these different hats, like an admin one way in customer service, and we're a coach, and we're like whatever work field, playing field you're in. It doesn't need to be that hard. So here on this podcast, this is a nice little bridge, because in all honesty, recording podcasts, and like I said before, like Limitless Living podcast, I ran it for a year. And the first 3 months, I recorded episodes every day. And by far, if you look at Instagram, if you look at, and this is also your invitation, like, where do you feel most alive? Because if we don't operate our business from pressure, and if we move it and live it and lead it from a place of joy, that means that we focus on the things, the tasks, whatever it is that brings us joy. And for me, the podcast, I can do this all day. There's no pressure, like zero pressure. I just feel lit up. And when I sort of stop this recording, I am high on life, like honestly high on life. So for me, the podcast, I already knew that this is the core of my business, because there's so much stories and so much life experience and knowledge and wisdom and all the things that I share. And I want to use this as my channel. So what I did is I hired Cynthia Zeladon, and I invited her here with me on this podcast because I thought this would make such a beautiful introduction of, the body of work that Hustle Heart is, to share a bit more. And what I wanted also, from one of my core values is authenticity. And I thought it would be so much fun to have like a heart-to-heart conversation. And also, as I explained to Cindy as well, almost like a first date, through her questions, you get to know myself, because I recorded 2 introductions as well. And that was just me, myself, and I was just sending information, did that before, been that, done that. And this called for a totally different way of moving. And also, I do feel that this new era, it's about collaboration. And as a leader, as a CEO, I don't look to hire people in my business so I can delegate tasks to. I hire expertise. I hire knowledge that I don't have. And one of my new favorite books is actually Who, Not How. And it describes that, when we, and this is a lot of us, right? When we think that we need to do it all by ourselves, and we have this big goal. So for me, let's put it at, having in the thousands of women listen to this podcast. And then I need to ask myself how. But when I, as a female entrepreneur, when we ask ourselves how, that leads to problems. Because if we knew how to, we would already be doing it. So that in itself brings challenges. So that's why instead of asking ourselves how,
ask ourselves who, because there is a person who already has the answers. So we don't need to hustle and find out, because we don't need to know it all. We need to surround ourselves with people we can trust and who have more expertise. And this is sometimes the difficulty. And if I look at myself, my younger self who was insecure, I would have felt intimidated, because who am I? If I'm running my business, I need to know it all. Like, how can I let someone in my business and I don't know her field and I can give her the answers? And so we micromanage. And so from that insecurity, we hire low level people that we can manage so we feel superior. But this to me, and this is also, I'm going to talk a lot more because there's so many stories to be unpacked within, just this already. But where I see the old paradigm, and the old paradigm is very much led by the masculine, where it's all about achieving and all about, it's that pressure, it's hustle. It's, and men thrive on that. And don't understand me wrong, because the masculine is sacred and very much needed in our business. The masculine gives order, it gives structure, it is the systems, it's the processes, super important. It's the container for the feminine energy, because without that container, there will be chaos. Feminine flow will be all over the shop, many ideas, inspiration, but doesn't get shit done. But what I mean with the old paradigm is, look at the world. Look at Trump. Look at Putin. Like, it's all leaders, masculine, wounded masculine, that lead from a place of fear and dominance and like ego. Like, look at me. And we go to war and we want to have more and more and more and more at the cost and expense of other people so we feel better. But to me, the new paradigm, and I actually feel emotional saying this, but the new paradigm, it is collaboration, and it is fully in our power. And when we are fully in our power, there is no jealousy and there is no resentment and there is no, having someone on a stage next to us, because it is all side by side and we're all doing it together. So in this moment, perfect little bridge to invite you, like Cynthia. And if you're listening and you have been dreaming, desiring, you feel that urge within yourself that your voice is ready to be heard, and you're like, but I don't know how to create a podcast. This is your who. Or maybe you already been doing podcasts and you're like, I'm done doing it all by myself, because yes, it's a lot of work. And for me personally, with collaborating with Cynthia, I don't even want to say hiring Cynthia, but literally collaborating and having her expertise on board. And honestly, she's nothing short of amazing. With that brings expertise. And for me, this is also my next level of evolution, is that when I take myself serious and when I really want to focus and force, no, not force, want to channel my wisdom through the podcast, can I be serious about it? And then can I invest in serious knowledge and expertise? And that's the energy of it. So I asked Cynthia today to join me because I really wanted to, have a heart-to-heart conversation. And like I said in the beginning, it's almost like a little first date. She'll be asking me a lot of questions so that she already knows me because we've been together already for 2 months. And that's also something to take this slow, this podcast. I've always been in a hurry, like to launch. And now we're really savoring the podcast, savoring this process, building the right foundation, like it's an empire that's going to be built on this. And I really wanted her here, because I thought it made a great introduction and just a little beautiful dynamic of, two women sharing their stories. So here she is, Cynthia Zeladon. I am so grateful to have you here.
Oh man, you don't want to know how happy and grateful and proud I am of you. Yeah, we have been knowing each other for, I will say, like 3 months, maybe a little bit longer since we chatted for the first time. And you guys don't have the privilege that I have, but I have Alex right in front of me through a screen, yes, but right in front of me. And the energy that you feel through her voice is something that I can receive through the image as well. Like she is right here feeling all the feelings and believing the fact that a world where a balance between a healed masculine energy and a healed feminine energy can come together. I get the chills when I say this, can come together and we can create marvelous things from this. And this energy, this mindset, and this feeling is something that I embrace as well. And I know that is something that you guys listeners, you girls listeners, is something you embrace too. And I get the feeling that this is already the most honest and authentic first day I have ever had in my life. And I cannot wait to get to know more about you because I already know that you are an outside of the box thinker. Like that is clear to me and to everyone listening for sure. But I really look forward to know what else can I learn from you today. Shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I have a set of questions for you, and I'm kind of embodying this journalist side of myself who I kind of left
I love
behind. Yeah, in my 20s. But let's just start with a little icebreaker. I would love for you to introduce yourself without any labels, meaning tell me who you are without talking about your profession, without talking about what you study, where you come from, and so on and so forth. Who
Yeah.
is Alex?
I love this question. And just for the listeners here, just a little backstory. As we were preparing this episode, Cynthia was like, shall I share my questions I prepared? And I was like, no, I want this to be authentic. So surprise me. I trust you fully. And that's also something, again, from linking back to who, not how, is that when we control, sometimes we want to control. We want someone on our team, even within our relationship, right? Oh, and this is
Yeah.
a separate episode. And then we're gonna control. We invite someone, and then we want to micromanage the questions, and then that's not.
But you know what? This is really funny that you mentioned because on my end, and this is something you're going to be covering on a deeper level in future episodes, but
Yeah.
on my end, I was second guessing myself. I was
Mm.
doubting that the questions that I brought to the table and the conversation that was going to come up from these questions was going to be good enough. So
Yes.
this is really
Yeah.
interesting how imposter syndrome can play
Yes.
a
And
big
I
role.
am so grateful that you shared that as well, because that was actually something that I was thinking this morning that I wanted to, because you shared yesterday that you were nervous as well. And I found this such important because how often, and I think social media, the time we're of now, we look at all these people and it looks perfect and easy, but it's so important to share, because we all doubt and we all have that. Yeah, you were second guessing yourself whether your questions were good enough. But then from an empowered place, who would I be if I then it's almost then that I facilitate the doubt. You're like, okay, send it to me. I'm going to double check it and let you know if they're good enough. But then it's external validation, right? But for you, and this is also how you build confidence as well, is that you feel the fear, you do it anyway. And then tonight you lie in bed and you're like, God damn it. I was a freaking rock star.
We
Those
love that.
questions were on fire. And that's how you build power within yourself.
Yes, that's beautiful. Well, we already have another piece of information about you. You're a fantastic coach.
Yes. And I actually was thinking you were saying well, we have a listener here. We have a listener question, live. But yes, so to answer your question, yes, sorry, that was an
Who is Alex?
occupational hazard. Is that how you call it?
Well,
To sort of
yes,
unpack
in
what's
a way.
happening there. But I think, so you were asking without the labels, right? And that's hard. And this is beautiful
It
as well,
is.
because how often do we identify with what we do, and what we do, that's masculine, who we are, that's feminine. And that's sometimes difficult, that when our business quote unquote fails, when we have low numbers, when we don't have the people that we expected and we feel down. So we tied our identity to our business. But yeah, we are so much more than that. So I'm an adventurer, and I'm actually over the last 3 months, going back to my inner child, of remembering that I was a dreamer. I could dream forever. Like I could just lie in the grass and just spend hours and hours looking at the clouds, and I would see like crocodiles and dinosaurs and like all the things. So I am definitely a dreamer and I am curious. I am very much, how I would describe a student of life, like very curious that I am always looking at, is there a new way to do life? Like, is there a better way? Is there a smarter way? Is there, because if you look at what we're taught to believe through school, to, even our parents did their best with all they had. But some things are not useful. We don't get taught how to eat. We don't get taught the food that
Yeah.
is nutritious. We don't get taught about the world of energy. We get taught about, especially as women, be the good girls, obey, be nice, be kind, adapt, do what you are told. So I have always been super curious and also super stubborn. As in, I would say a rule breaker, like the amount of times that I think back at school that the teacher has told me off and like, Alex, you need to go to the hallway because I was not paying attention or I was just doing something else than was expected. So, and I take that with me in my work, that curiosity, but also sort of that rule breaker, because I do believe, and I think that's what I find difficult, quote unquote, difficult with the world where we're now, because we're so exposed. More than ever, we're so exposed. So we can have little glimpses into people, their worlds. And it's so tempting. There's temptation, to see people that quote unquote succeed. And this has been me definitely, where you look at like, okay, I want to do what she done. What has been her steps? What has been her method? And then we're going to copy it. But the true invitation is we need to figure it out by ourselves, what our own medicine is, what makes us happy. And that's just us. We were born alone. We're going to die alone. And that sounds super sad, but in a way, it's also very comforting that we need to do it ourselves. Like no one is coming to save us. And that really has been my mindset all the way, where that curiosity really came in, and what led me here today, also this podcast, Hustle Hard, because to pour everything that learned through trial and error and to share. I hope this answers your question.
I mean, you just throw gold out there because you're showing yourself, like, to get to a point where you can see yourself from such a gentle lens and with such a clarity. You, first things first, you got to be an adult. And being an adult is one of the biggest challenges. I just turned 30 years old, and I can tell that turning into an adult is one of the most difficult challenges one can face. And to get to the point where you can describe yourself in the way how you did it, well, one needs to see oneself as a whole, like the light and the dark. And I just love everything what you say, but something is sticking to my head. We just get the opportunity to grab some little glimpses into people's worlds. And I want to dive deeper into who you are by asking you, what is the one thing that you want people to understand about you and your life journey that has guided you to this point where you are talking about yourself in such an authentic way, where you are talking about this project, Hustle Hard, with such passion, and where you can be aware of the fact that, yes, we are born and we die only with ourselves, but we get the opportunity to do life with other people.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind here is I don't know if power is the right word, but just the potential to be able to turn pain into power. Because I referred to this before, where many of us, me included, we fear failure, and that's where perfectionism comes from. And sometimes perfectionism, it slows us down and it holds us back. It holds us small. And if I look at my life, it's been far from perfect. There's a lot of heartache. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of, if I look at myself, my inner child, my little Alex, who was 8 and like Goldilocks, and she was so much fun. But it wasn't even that she didn't feel seen. She wasn't seen. And if I look at love, that's been very much a topic that I didn't really feel. Unconditional love, I had no idea what it was up until I met my partner. So if I look at my life story where I, worked myself on the edge of burnout, and where I failed my first business miserably, where I at one point had an alcohol issue, where I, drank and I had all these blackouts and felt such a deep shame, and I carried so much anger within myself towards, my upbringing and things that were out of my control. The person that I am now is full of gratitude. And I know that sounds so super cliche, but I wouldn't change any of it. So because the reason that I have a story to share, the reason that I have, I recorded a podcast every day for 3 months. The reason that I have so much, let's call it knowledge or wisdom, is through my failure. And this is also something that I think is so important for everyone listening as well, for you, the listener, is that the sooner we accept failure and the sooner we learn from it, because we either win or we learn. So failure, when we are willing to learn from our lessons, and we are also taking ownership and because that has been big in my life, that I at one point I really needed to look myself in the mirror and stop blaming others that I have been doing the first, let's say, 30 years of my life. So when you're there, when you're able to turn pain into power, like true power, and you embody the lessons, I think that's what I hope to bring to the table. And what I do with the women in my container one-on-one here, the podcast listeners, is to look at your pain through a different lens, and that it becomes potent.
Oh man, this is so beautiful. It's just, it's really difficult for me to gather my ideas around all the beauty that you just share, because you share some moments or some situations that I feel and I believe help you change your perspective in the way how you want to do life. And I just want to publicly share my gratitude for you talking about inner child wounds, and for you talking about the things that are not so beautiful, but that we go through while we are growing up. Because yes, the education system and our parents are trying to do the best for us with the tools that they have, but emotional intelligence is something that we don't get to learn until we fail, until we fall.
Yeah. And sometimes also I think there's beauty in just saying it really sucked. We
It
don't
really
need to
sucks.
always polish it. Like, even though when people around us have been doing their best, quote unquote, it can still feel so
We have the
freaking
right to feel anger. Yes.
painful. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, this
We have
really
the right.
sucks. Like, we don't always need to have it all positive, and it needs to be
No.
pretty, right? It's all part. And I loved what you referred to earlier as well, is that we live in a world full of duality, and we have both light and darkness, and it's embracing all parts. And it means that we need to be willing to face our demons, but also to accept our flaws and our shits and our failures and like all the things. It's all part of life. But before we continue,
Yes.
can I ask you something? Because
Please go.
you've been referring, and this makes a good conversation as well. You've been referring to that auto adulty, like, okay, I needed to move up. Like, what does that mean to you, and why is that so important?
Okay. Woof. I need to have a second to gather my thoughts again, because trigger warnings allowed.
Sure. Everything on the table.
I love that. So I am coming from a pretty traumatic childhood and teenagehood, I must say. Honestly, everyone comes from a place like that. Once you start healing your past, you get to understand that, that wasn't right. That what happened to me wasn't quite okay. And I can identify 2 moments where my life was kind of cut off and I wasn't really connected with life. In my childhood, when my mom and my dad decided to separate and stop the marriage, which was for the best, to be honest. now looking at it from the distance. And when I was a teenager, when I was 19 years old, that transition is really vulnerable for many of us. That year, I was a victim of sexual abuse by a guy from my university. And that broke my heart and broke my perception of self and broke my perception of who I am and where I am standing. So for several years, I was so disconnected with life that I didn't know if I was still a teenager or if I was a young woman, because my mind kind of, for survival mode, decided to separate from reality. So when I decided to speak out loud about what happened through my body and through my emotions, which was one of the bravest things I have ever done in my life, I cannot say it was a decision, because it was not like I'm waking up this morning and I'm deciding to change my life, because it doesn't happen like that. It's a process. So throughout my early 20s up until my 25th anniversary of life, I will use the word decided. I decided that it was about time for me to reconnect with life. And so I started traveling. And so I decided to fall in love. I allowed myself to fall in love with my partner, with life, with my family, with my friends. And in that moment, from a conscious point of view, I start to heal. And so I can tell nowadays that I am an adult because I can take decisions from a conscious point of view. I'm like super aware of the decisions I am making. And that is good and that is bad. But I feel like I'm growing up. And for the first time, I am going through a growing transition, fully aware what is going on in my mind and my feelings and in my body.
Great. Oh, that makes so much sense. And thank you so much for being brave by sharing, 1% of your story, but the things that are fragile and vulnerable. Like, I am so in awe with you saying that, sharing that, because I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Life is a lot, but life is tough and you have to kind of figure things out. But if there is something I am, is grateful, because I have the opportunity to live this life, and I have the opportunity to make mistakes, and I allow myself to, just experience this. And this is something we have been talking a lot in our private chats, Alex. We are in this world not to perform on a job, not to perform for other people. We are in this world to experience the length and the width of this human experience. So going back to your question, I am so obsessed with growing up and adulting, because it's the first time in my life I can tell I am so full of life. And I am consciously so full of life. And I am so grateful for being alive and for having the opportunity to experience success and experience failure, whatever that means in my own experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because now I understand what you mean with adulting, because from listening to your story, it is linked to being self-aware and taking full responsibility over your own life.
Yes.
Where I listen to you and I hear like I was still stuck in that survival mode, and it's almost like I froze in that time where I was still that teenager almost, and hurt and sort of disconnected from life, how you described it.
Pretty much.
And now you're like wide open, facing it. So I've never looked at it that way, because to me, adults also, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because there are so many chores and tasks and things that we need to do as adults. And in a way, we're all so disconnected from that joy that we had as a child, because life was just, everything was possible. So thank you so much for clarifying, because that makes a lot of sense as well. And also from that, what you said, and I love that, the decision, like literal decision, I decided to fall in love with life.
Yeah.
That was big as well, because that's a conscious decision. And my body of work at this moment in time is focused for, I work with female entrepreneurs, because like you said, we all suffer trauma, but big T, small t, everyone has different lives and different experience. But the fact is that once we enter entrepreneurship, it's almost like this pressure cooker, right? And I experienced this with my first business, that when we have unhealed trauma, when there are wounds of not feeling worthy, of being afraid, of being too much, of not feeling seen, not being connected with yourself, and you're not able to fully show up authentically. And in a lot of ways, when I entered, like honestly, up until my 30th, I was thinking like, I'm okay, I'm fine. My past, whatever happened to me, I don't have a scar on my body. Like, I'm good. I'm okay. Until I started my first business, and it was almost like all my demons came out to play. Here I was, and this is a little bridge to hustle hard. Here I was, and I wasn't aware, feeling totally unworthy, low self-esteem, even though I seemed always confident, like perfectionism. I was an overthinker. Oh, the nights that I couldn't sleep because I was doubting myself, my decisions, all the endless things on my to-do list. And I sacrificed literally my whole life. At one point, I was living off, after my rent, I had 180 euros. I know that you are in Nicaragua, so your economy is a bit different, but from Europe, 180 euros, life is expensive here. So it was literally food to the minimum, and there was no money for joy. And like I said no to all the social gatherings because I was determined, and I felt actually proud because I was like, but I have a mission and I have a vision, and I need this business to succeed. And therefore I felt like almost wearing this chip on my shoulder that I was willing, like, no, I'm not going out for drinks with my friends because I have a mission, and no, I'm not going to family gatherings. But what ended up is that I was isolated. It was just working on my business 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year, maybe longer. At the end of it, depleted. And I had to look at myself in the mirror and like, how did you get yourself here? Like, if this isn't low self-worth, I don't know what is, because apparently that was what my life was worth to me. Work, business, hustle, putting so much pressure on myself, and that fear, like, but what if I won't succeed? And there's no one to blame but us for those decisions to getting ourselves there. Because when we, and that's the feminine, that's the hard. And that's the question I ask myself on the edge of burning out. Like, surely there must be a different way of doing life. Like, surely it cannot be this hard. And we get to decide. Like, our business is our playground. Our life is our playground. Like I started this episode, like, we are an artist and life is art. So what are we creating? And if we truly believe that success is inevitable, and this is also where I guide my clients towards, where you truly feel, and again, of course, up and down, some days you feel that and other days don't. But when you truly feel your success is inevitable, you start to make different choices. So when we enter the entrepreneurship world, whatever, when we enter the business world with unhealed trauma, like, the way you were explaining as well, Cynthia, it comes back to us like a boomerang. Like, our business will teach us. They will say, like, wake up, lady.
Yeah. And I think we can all relate to that, because I was just picturing myself when I started working online. I didn't start it as a podcast manager, although I work as a radio producer for several years. But online, I started as a virtual assistant doing all the things. And I was so focused on, I need to work, that I found myself sometimes waking up to my laptop at 6 a.m. in the morning and stopping working around 10 p.m. And that is not normal. That is not okay. We need to stop normalizing and romanticizing this kind of hustle culture. I just wanted to build a bridge because I had this one question, and I want to read it because I think we haven't mentioned that you are Dutch. You live in the Netherlands, and the Dutch culture, the Dutch culture, just like in the US and Canada and the UK and any other country you can mention, the culture is pretty much all about performance. Getting that degree, getting that job, making that kind of income per year, and so on and so forth. So you can count yourself as a successful person. And if you don't have that, then you are a huge failure. And who wants to be a failure from this lens, right? So something I really would love to know from you is how this hustle culture has impacted your life and shaped it. The searches you have right now. I think you
Yeah.
mentioned it a little bit, but I would love to maybe if you can pinpoint one specific
Yeah.
moment.
Absolutely. And I think this goes for the Western world, Europe,
Yeah.
America. Like what comes up also is like a little history lesson, right? If you look at the men and if you look at hundreds of years, that men have always been the persons who brought in the money, to say it like that. Like women always have
The
historically
providers.
been, yeah, the providers. That's the word. Women always have been the caretakers, nurturing the house, the home. I always find it madness. Like a couple of weeks back or months back, I've been seeing the Netflix documentary or movie. It was about was the first advocate. Is advocate like legal Ruth something like from New York?
The lawyer?
Like yeah, she was a lawyer. That's the word. Sorry. Like she was a lawyer. And this was like not even 80 years ago that as a female, you couldn't be a lawyer. Like that sort of blows my mind. If you look at it, we only have rights to vote for 100 years. And the reason that I share that is more to understand that the world as we know it has been built by men. And it isn't wrong. It's not a wrong thing. It's just more if you look at also like the Forbes top 500 or the bigger millionaires, the billionaires even, like most of the majority is men because they had those
The
role
opportunity.
models.
Yep.
Yeah, but also role models. Because if only our generation now, we have role models where we can look up into females like more and more and more CEOs. And there are billionaires like the founder of Stacks, for example. But what I mean to say, or what I mean saying that, is that the company structure, like how corporate structure is built, that's all from that masculine energy. And they thrive on hustle culture. So when looking at one of the first things that I manifested without realizing what manifestation was, having no clue about energy, is I got into the business that I loved and learned the most. And I spent 6 years of my life working there, and it was an international company, very sales driven. And within a year, I promoted myself. I came in as sort of a client account manager. I've always had a background in sales and communication, sales as in communicating, not communication as in marketing. But I got a promotion there, country manager, general manager. So at one point, I was leading a team of 20 in 2 countries. I've been involved in setting up Belgium. I was running Holland, the full operational side, but also means contracts like $1 million contracts. And the reason I bring in this moment is that even though that I was on a payroll, it was a very masculine environment. Like it was all like, especially sales. It was all flashy. It was all, we still stayed in 5-star hotels and incentives and money needed to be spent. That's also like, because it was success and achievement. It's all very much like, look at me having it all figured out. And that was such a crucial time for me because one, I've developed tons in just business strategy and hiring and firing teams and just what it takes to build a team, and to lead as well. But one, is just the show always go on. Like even if I was sick, I had the flu. I was always because sort of I felt that I needed to prove myself. But the story also that comes up is that it wasn't authentic at all because even when shit happened, no one shared it. It always like a story, like a sales pitch, always with a ribbon on it. Like when we were talking with clients, everything needed to be sort of showcased as being perfect and being good. And it lacked a soul. And the whole, like my work lacked soul. It didn't have meaning. I didn't feel purpose because one of the things is that it was everything I ever wanted to be that manager, to be that hotshot. Like I was traveling the world for work in Australia and Malaysia or Asia, that is. I was making pretty, really decent money I was not even 30 back then, but I felt so empty. I felt like, even if I felt half as good as it looked. So my life looked amazing on the outside. And inside, I felt like a ghost. I felt totally disconnected. And that was also the time that I lost myself in drinking and like, no shit, Sherlock, on hindsight. So your question of, what I've been through in terms of hustle, there was a lot of hustle because that's how you get that tap on your shoulder. And that's how you get to earn your badges, is that you work hard. So it's first in, last out. And then how much is success worth? Sacrificing it all. Like, yes, okay, I was there, quote unquote. I had everything I ever dreamt about, but I wasn't happy. There was no joy. It was all like I was walking around with a mask. Alexandra, yeah, well, it looked happy, but didn't feel happy. And at one point I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, how can I not be happy when I have everything that I ever dreamt about?
I mean, I just love everything what you say here, because you are also letting us know what you learned from this hustle culture and the reason why you decided to take distance from it, because you didn't have anything to look forward to.
Yeah, tell you something else, and this is big also for everyone, is that especially because did you have like a job before? Because I was on a payroll. Did you come from a corporate? Have you worked before in
you're
a
asking me?
business?
Yeah. Yeah. I work for international NGOs for Nicaragua and the region. Like, I had very good positions as well.
Yeah.
And I just felt freaking empty.
But then
for
the
several
interesting
reasons.
thing is that when that is our example of how a business is run, and we are almost like nurtured into, programmed almost like that. When we start our own business, we do the exact same. So we work our business as being an employer. And an employer has all these checklists and all these to-dos and like, okay, done, 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 go, 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 because that's how we earn our promotion. That's how we're being seen. We work hard. But the difference is that when we run our own business, we are CEO. So it's not about doing all the things anymore. It's not about looking for that external validation don't have to prove. So to me, it's so fascinating. And I've been guilty on this as well. But here in Europe, the Western world, so to say, it's almost like to say you clock in at 9 and you clock out at 5, 6. But like, how many entrepreneurs still, start at 9 and then done at 6 or done at 8, but we work the same motion.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to start wear a different hat. As an entrepreneur, a leader, a CEO, you're the visionary. So that's my how, not who as well, is that you shouldn't go about it the same way as them. Like, I needed to, and that's why I fell flat on my face. Like, one, unhealed trauma. But then two, also thinking, me being a general manager, having it all figured out, I know how to run a business. Well, think again. You're not in a payroll anymore.
Well, think again. I love that. You know what? You're not asking me, but in my case, and maybe some people can relate to this, in my case, and my mom used to make fun of me because I usually quit after a year working on a NGO. I only work for NGOs when I had office jobs, but I was just not feeling great. I used to feel like people undermined me because of my age. People didn't really pay close attention to my knowledge, and they thought, she's young, she's stupid, she doesn't know anything. Even though I had a master's degree on my back already. Like, I went through that. So my point is, when I decided to make the transition from working on an office and working online, I did it because I knew that I wanted to work with people who appreciated my knowledge and who appreciated who I am as a human being, with my wounds and my healing journey and so on and so forth. And I just want to mention that because one of the most beautiful things about growing in this entrepreneurship journey is that you get not just the opportunity to reflect on the hustle culture that has been induced into your perception of reality, but you also get the opportunity to identify who you want to build a tribe with. Who do you want to build community with? And I think that is one of the most beautiful lessons I have gathered from being an online entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And can I ask you a vulnerable question?
Go ahead.
Because where you shared like that you weren't you didn't feel taken serious. And that's a lot of women,
Mhm.
I had the
Yeah.
same. Like I felt like I had to literally extra loud to be seen by others.
Yes.
But how much were you taking yourself serious back then? How much were you doubting your own capabilities?
Oh, I mean, probably 110%.
Yeah. And that's sometimes because I have that too. That's why I ask, is that our outside world? It's always a reflection of our inner world. So when we feel like I'm not being
Amen.
taken serious, okay, but am I
Amen.
taking myself serious?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's and then true. And that's then also like when we come from that energy and we start our own business, there's no hiding that we need to start taking ourselves serious. And that's the journey. Like, okay, I need to let myself be seen. Okay, but am I seeing myself? Okay, what am I seeing? Am I glad with what I'm seeing? Like there's so many layers. But that's the work.
Yep. Hey, I want to build a bridge towards hustle hard because you have been talking about what hustle hard means. And it's kind of this transition into unlearning and relearning.
Mm.
How do we build a relationship with money? How do we rebuild a relationship with work? And how do we fully enjoy life? Am I right?
Yes.
Is that what hustle
Yeah.
hard meant to
No.
you?
Yeah. Like to me, because there's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong with believing in something and being determined and putting in the hours. But from the stories that we both shared is that when our heart is not in it, it feels empty. So even though we were chasing, and I always say like, so a lot of it is like, if I have insert milestone, if I make 10K, I'll be happy. Like if I have, for me, like if I am that manager, if I am, but that means that you're always sort of future tripping, and it's just empty because once you reach that milestone, it's the cliche, right? It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. So when our heart is not in it, like when we're not fulfilled now, like let's say that this podcast, if I would be like, okay, it would be amazing when I have 500 listeners, but I find the whole process horrible. So I have anxiety. I cannot sleep. I feel like I'm not being good enough and I struggle over my own words. And like the whole journey is like dramatic, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's the point? So to me, like our hearts and what I said previously, like the biggest journey we can take on is moving from head to heart. And I wrote this down, this quote actually, which is from Buddha. Yeah. Like, and I love that so much because he said, the mind knows no answers, but the heart knows no questions. And we try to logically build our businesses, from our minds. We hustle hard and because we think that's what we have to do, but our heart knows no questions. So there's a certain element of surrender that even though, we all have our inner voice, but the question is, do we listen to it? And when our inner voice speaks to us and she tells us something ridiculous, we're like, no way, like, I'm not good enough. I cannot do that. Who am I to do? Like all the voices, the inner critic that then comes, we close down literally the door of magic. So our heart, when we want to manifest with ease, and it doesn't mean that it is easy, that's something else because we need to move through our own shadows, so it is moving through a lot of resistance is the better word. But in order to create magic, we need to be willing to follow the illogical route of the soul, and the heart. That's where our feelings sit in, law of attraction 101, like attracts like. Energy. So for me, hustle hard is, I don't know if hibernation is a word. I don't think so, but it is the two elements of the heart and the hustle that when we hustle and we are led by our hearts, that it doesn't need to be logical, but it brings us joy and it brings us fulfillment and we feel our heart expand. That's where the magic is, so much magic. And the story that comes to mind also, which is, I think, a beautiful story to share is how we connected because that is through the heart. the mind would say like, not possible. So a little backstory is that I decided like, okay, I'm going to take this podcasting thing serious. I've been doing it for a year. I haven't been growing it. Also have not been focusing on growing it. Also not knowing how to grow it, and honestly, because, didn't have the expertise. And like I said, putting a lot of new tasks on my plate. So I was like, okay, I'm serious now and I'm going to look to someone. But where I am now, I already felt like I'm not even looking at a person from a very logical resume review kind of position. For me, I was just literally focused on energy, which sounds a bit weird, but I was literally on Instagram. I was, not Googling, but searching for a podcast manager. And all these women come up, and I was just looking at the photos, and I just almost reading the energy. And I saw your photos, and I just saw this radiant woman. And I was like, she feels exciting. And to be honest, I only sent out a DM to 2 people, I think, one of you. But your DM, like your Instagram, that was sort of out of, like, you didn't post, I think, for months.
Yes.
So my mind, easily could have said like, okay, she's not working, she's not doing anything, like move on, from a logic standpoint. But the heart was like, send her a DM and see if she's available, if she's active and working as a podcast manager. And I know from your end, it's been pretty magical as well, because you told me
Yes.
as well, like, I've been manifesting a client like you. And then plump, here she is out of nowhere
Yes.
in your inbox. So how was that for you?
Man, it was extremely beautiful because I remember perfectly. So I was just coming back home from a trip to Ecuador, and because I was inactive on Instagram, I was considering all the things that I wanted to do to be back online and to be brave enough to be public again, which is one of my most challenging aspects of being an entrepreneur online. And so I was manifesting, which is the static way of saying praying. But let's say I was praying, a person who was serious about podcasting, because I have been investing in my knowledge. And yes, I work as a radio producer for years, but it's not the same. It's a completely different dynamic. So I reinvest myself in learning how this works. And for me, podcasting is how I can help women to regain their power, to embrace their beautiful voice and the beautiful knowledge and the beautiful wisdom they have to share with the world, and bring this voice to the people who need to hear what they have to say. That's for me my mission. And so I was praying and asking for guidance around how I can show myself, how I can show up so I can attract this kind of people. And while I was writing the copy for my website, I received your message. That is how the universe answers prayers or manifestations. And I remember I told you I was in a working place, and I say to you something along the lines that I was extremely excited and I couldn't believe that message because I was literally asking for you.
That's crazy. And isn't, like, for everyone here, like, aren't these the moments you live for? Right.
Yes.
But when we hustle, and that's the whole, when we hustle, and what I mean by that is when we are constantly go, 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 there's no space for magic. There is no room for it. So we need to be able to find peace within ourselves. We need to be able to shut down the mind, as in the overthinker, because by definition, when we overthink, we're not authentic. Because we're creating life from the outside in, like, what will people think of me? Like, I cannot do that because that person, this person. But when we live from the inside out, it doesn't matter. Just embrace the weird. And that's what I said to Cynthia as well. Like, preparing for this podcast, like, I love to show imperfectly perfect. It doesn't need, it can be messy. Like, this is life.
One of my best friends, she is a stand-up comedian, and she's helping me to regain my voice. Again, based on the story that I shared with you about my teenage years, I wasn't able to talk for years about my life and about what happened with me. I was living in a prison inside of my head. And so I was talking with her, and she says, you know what? The most important thing about a stand-up comedy and presenting yourself to the outside world is to embrace your cringe. Be cringe. Allow
Yeah.
yourself to do crazy things. Allow yourself to
Yeah.
feel shame. Because by allowing yourself to feel shame, you are going to be able to step into your full potential because you are
Yes.
going to get to know the cringe side of yourself. And you are
Yeah.
going to get to know how funny that is.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so beautiful because I always also talk how I explain, and it's easier said than done, but a lot of people move through life being vanilla,
Yes.
because everyone likes vanilla. But then the more you embrace, like you said, I love that also, the cringe, the weird, the shame, like just everything you are, all everything, like the dark, the light, all the things. What kind of ice cream would you be? Like if you make your own special sauce, like what kind of what is the ice cream that comes
You're
out?
you're asking
Yeah,
me?
it's a question.
Ooh, I will combine pistachio. It's so delicious. But pistachio from Italy, it needs to be from an Italian little town.
Sure, we'll
Otherwise, I
get
don't
it for
want
you.
that pistachio. Yes, we'll get it for me. Yes, I love that. It will be a combination of pistachio with a very dark chocolate without any external sugar or sweetness added. That is not weird, but it's just my favorite one, so I had to say it.
And
How
that's it,
about you?
pistachio and
And chocolate, but really dark
okay.
chocolate, probably coming from somewhere in the Amazonas. Chocolate
I
coming from
love how
Ecuador.
specific
Uh,
this is.
I
For
gotta be very
me,
picky.
yeah, for me it would be salted caramel.
Delicious.
Um,
Mm.
what I love, and this is, I don't know if it makes a great combination, but I love cinnamon ice cream as well.
I
But
never try it.
just, it's so good. But then with chocolate sauce, like, and chocolate chip cookies, like all the things. The point being, though, is that there will be women listening who think, like, that's disgusting. Pistachio, I don't like it. Like, no. But the beauty is that the more we embrace that unique taste, like you said, the more we magnetize our people, because when we don't share the core of who we are, and we don't share also our vision or our excitement, our passions, our hobbies, like all the things, and we like, oh, people will think something about this, and we close it all off, we won't be able to attract the people like, oh, I like that too. I've read that book, or I
Yes.
watched that movie, or I share that hobby. And that's because I think for a lot of us women, again, going back historically, we were made to adapt. So for us being seen, and seeing ourselves, having the freedom to really be true to our own
Yeah.
nature, to our own inner voice, that's a journey in itself.
Yeah.
So I
I
love
agree.
that. Embrace the cringe.
Embrace the cringe. I have one last question for you, Alex, because you already answered the other questions that I have about
Yeah.
hustle hard. But my very last question to you is, who are you becoming?
Beautiful question. Who am I becoming? More and more myself. And I think the who are you? And this is also part of my program, which I take the women through, is that I actually do believe that we need to let go because like you shared before, is that you made a prison of your head. Like a lot of us, and I speak from personal experience, is that we build prisons around our lives, golden prisons. And also because we believe that we are who we are. So this is me done. I am Alexandra, I'm a coach, I am a mentor, I'm a teacher, like whatever it is, and this is me. But if I look at how you evolve, and if you allow yourself to evolve, there's a different version of you. Sometimes tomorrow morning when you wake up, because every day you shed those skins. So for me, who am I becoming? More and more myself. And who, I don't know how because that's I'm not
That's
there yet, so
magic.
I'm cannot. But it is releasing, and that's again a lifelong journey. So when we allow ourselves to evolve and pivot, as much as we feel, I'm a manifesting generator, so I go fast.
I love that.
I have a lot of passions, but yeah, I think one of the beauties is also to break free from a box, and the golden prison that we created, like, feeling guilty for taking time off, thinking that we're less committed when we're not spending a whole day working, allowing ourselves free time, allowing ourselves just time away from our office. spending time with our loved ones and prioritizing our self-care and our well-being and unbox ourselves. So, who am I sometimes, like, who are you sometimes feels still a bit restrictive. So when we allow ourselves to just play and we remove the labels and also remove the box, because sometimes I think that also the difficulty with social media is that we sort of need to be consistent around these pillars. But what if we can be all of it? What if today I want to talk about, I don't know, yoga? I don't do yoga, by the way, but we are
But maybe you want to talk about it.
changing, ever evolving humans. So when we give ourselves permission that maybe, like myself, I started a podcast and after 4 episodes, I was like, no, I need a hiatus. And I've been doing, and this is a different episode, but lots of shadow work. Like I started, if you look at, the next level is fully being seen, allowing myself to be seen fully. I have finally embraced the part of myself that is a psychic. Next week we're ending, I think it was a 16-week container of psychic school. And Lord, let me tell you how confronting it was, uncovering so many layers, releasing so many parts of myself that I didn't even knew were holding me back. So many frustrations. And again, this is a whole episode in itself that I'm more than happy to share. But your question, where are you moving into? More of myself, more of my authentic self, where just ultimate freedom, and freedom, we talk a lot about freedom of money, abundance. But to me, the ultimate freedom is freedom of emotional freedom. Like I said, that you can spend time away from your business because you trust your business will grow and you put yourself first and your well-being. And you just feel free every day in the decisions and your choices. And even though that people have judgment or have an opinion, that you feel free to be true to your own core and your own being. And again, that's easier said than done because there are so many layers, parents, family, partner, which is our biggest mirror, the joy. But that's my next chapter, is to roam free.
I love this so much. I mean, I cannot wait to get to know more about you and to dive into more episodes of this show.
Yeah.
To be honest.
And also to end, the last thing that came to mind as well. This is something I didn't want to share this. Actually, I was meaning to share this when I was 30 or 60 days in, but I've stopped drinking now for 10 days, which isn't a lot. It doesn't sound a lot, but it's huge for me. I've done this or tried to do this before, but then I realized now that it was fueled by fear. Now, because this is from curiosity, right? My biggest question now is like, how high can I fly when I remove all distractions? And that, if you look at the next level of who am I, like, how high can I fly? And sometimes true external. And, for some people, I'm not against drinking. Like everyone has their own sovereignty to choose and there's seasons of life. This is my season. I don't know how long this season will be. Maybe 1 month, 3 months, year, forever. I don't know. It's all good. But when we feel we are being distracted, we distract ourselves through work, because what you shared as well, Cynthia, if you are running away from the pain and we distract ourselves with work distract ourselves with work. For some people, it is alcohol. For some people, it's food. For some people, it's whatever it is to numb, to feel. And that's the scariest thing. Is we don't feel scared of failure. We feel scared of our own light, because who are we when we shine our brightest light and we let ourselves be seen? That's the freaking scary part. To finally arrive, to be successful, to be empowered, to be strong. So I think this is a beautiful ending to this episode.
love
Thank
it.
you so much for this
Thank
episode,
you.
Cynthia. It felt so special.
Same. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and for everyone here with us, arriving till the end, thank you so much. I feel so grateful to have you here with me. Like, if anything came up here, like if you feel like share your cringe, if you feel ready to be seen, if you feel like sharing whatever this set in motion for you, like my home is Instagram, DM. I'm going to add it in the show notes. Cynthia's going to add it in the show notes, actually. My work now
That's
is done.
right.
Isn't that beautiful? And this is going to be out in the world with so much ease. But you can find me in my DM, and it's going to be in the show notes. Let me know. I'm really excited where this podcast will lead us. Yeah, I wish you a magical day, make magic happen. Thank you.